All right, folks, it's time to welcome Austin Lai to the Write the Doc stage. Austin will share with us how he used both qualitative and quantitative feedback through user surveys, data pipelines, and dashboards to create more meaningful feedback cycles in docs. He says that it all comes back to ensuring user needs are met by making data-driven decisions about engagement and satisfaction. Austin is the communications chair for the University of Chicago Alumni Club of the Bay Area. He loves doing group high-intensity cardio classes like Barry's and CrossFit and collecting wine. He also enjoys playing rugby with the San Francisco Frog, which happens to be the oldest gay and inclusive rugby club in the Western United States. But for now, it's time for us to be both engaged and ultimately satisfied by Austin's talk. Folks, join me in welcoming Austin Lai.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that great intro. My name's Austin, and today I'm going to be walking you through how I led the improvement of our existing user survey on the Datadog documentation site and worked with our data and analytics teams to enhance our technical writers' abilities to create and build dashboards with additional documentation analytics. So, as you heard from our MC here, I'm a technical writer living in San Francisco. I've been there for over 5 years, and I really love the city. I play rugby with the SF Fog. Here we are. I like taking group HIIT cardio classes like Barry's, and I also love binge watching Real Housewives. I hope you guys all like it too. I recently left Datadog last month to take a little sabbatical. I'm looking for my next opportunity and would love to chat if any of you guys are hiring or know any organizations that are looking for a writer who loves docs as code, automation, and the open source community. So I'd like to take a little pulse check. Can you raise your hand if any of you have heard of the curse of knowledge before? Okay. So according to Wikipedia, the curse of knowledge is a cognitive bias that happens when an individual who's communicating with a bunch of other individuals, they assume that they have the background knowledge to understand what you're talking about. So in other words, it's when you assume others know something just because you do. Let's try this out. Let's take Datadog, for example. Just around the room, what do you think Datadog is most commonly known for? APM, logs, metrics, data pipelines, single pane of glass. Love that. That is all true. Did you also know that Datadog is also interested in securing your developer applications as part of the DevSecOps lifecycle? The curse of knowledge happens in our documentation. Writers, product managers assume that they know what a page is trying to say, but oftentimes it might miss the mark. For example, you might think a getting started guide on a product provides all the necessary information for a user, but when they're reading it, they're really looking to solve a particular use case for their situation or organization, or maybe they're trying to onboard onto a specific tool that isn't covered in the workflow. This curse of knowledge makes us blind to gaps in our understanding, and that's why our user feedback surveys are so helpful. It shows us what people actually need rather than what we think they need. And our goal with capturing and measuring user feedback is to confirm these intentions and goals that our users have. Our doc site has a bunch of content, and we want to make sure that the content that we're writing for them is for the right audience and is for the right reasons. And because I forgot to click on this, here's a funny example of what it looks like. So we've historically set up quantitative data collection on our doc site using Google Analytics as well as Datadog itself. We love to dog food Datadog, so we have this real user monitoring product as well as product analytics. And these suite of tools allow us to dive into live user sessions, analyze user traffic, and investigate areas where our users might experience 404s or dead clicks or bad user experience patterns in any application or website. This information is captured in Metabase, which is our open source Power BI dashboard tool that allows any Datadog employee to analyze and query data from a variety of data sources and create documentation dashboards or marketing dashboards or whatever sort of function that you exist in. We've also set up qualitative data collection. And so we use Hotjar, which is a third-party survey feedback platform, where you can both design and embed surveys on your application or website. So for us, we will take a little bit of JavaScript snippet, and we'll put that in an HTML partial in our repository. And this allows our feedback widget or DocSet-specific survey questions to persist site-wide, meaning it's on every single page and asks the same set of questions to every single user. Or you can have it to ask specific questions on specific doc pages or specific dot sets. So, as an example of that, maybe you're interested in integrating Datadog with your company. So we have this Datadog integrations page, which we have over 650 of. And this allows users to basically ask, did you find the integration that you were looking for? If not, what is it? And can we support it? Our user feedback collection system doesn't stop there. We also welcome feedback both internally and externally from both Datadog employees and Datadog customers. People can post in our documentation Slack channel asking for a review for a pull request that they might have opened in our repository, or they might be asking to update any existing documentation where they experienced an error or perhaps noticed some sort of outdated information. And they can also start conversations in this documentation channel or any other product-specific channel to talk about areas of improvement in the docs. We also talk about how the Datadog documentation repository is open source, which means we triage and review any GitHub issues and pull requests that come in from external and internal people. We also collect feedback from channels in the Datadog public Slack. So these are customers who are working with Datadog, have questions, maybe already have a support ticket in action, but just need a response. We also take feedback from our translators using Transifex, which is our third-party translation vendor platform, where translators will take the source code that we provide in English and then translate it into a language such as Korean, French, Japanese, or something else. And these translators tend to notice and catch typos really early on, so they're really, really helpful. Lastly, we also have our product managers, our engineers, and our pre- and post-sales support engineers who can directly create tickets on our Jira board to log any issues with onboarding issues or a troubleshooting documentation, because they are religiously combing through these docs on a day-to-day basis to help customers and help them fix their issues. Next, with Hotjar, we manually triage user responses that come in on a week-to-week basis. We also have a dedicated Slack channel that allows us to hop into this direct source code of a Transifex, where translators might note issues, and we can hop into the direct inline code where they're experiencing this issue. We also might be involved in support tickets or customer escalations, and heaven forbid, a production incident, in which case we have to respond in a timely manner in our US business operating hours. We also sometimes get executive feedback from our lovely C-suite, bless their heart. And in this situation, you know, they're pretty hands-on, so they'll notice something in the product. Maybe they'll see something on our doc site, and they'll tell us, hey, this doesn't look right. Or maybe this needs to be updated. And we get on that pronto. So now that we're primed about the types of user feedback and our various data collection methods, let's talk about this problem that our documentation team experienced last year, which prompted us to embark on this documentation survey revamp and documentation analytics journey. In June of 2023, we started to exceed the number of user responses that we could access in Hotjar based on our pricing plan. As you can see here, it's 500 responses per month. So this means each month we could only see 500 individual user survey responses at a time. And if there are any more that came in, we would be rate limited and we'd be prevented from seeing those until the next month. So, in order to mitigate us from being rate limited, we wanted to investigate a couple of things. Should we look into upgrading our Hotjar plan, which would be an additional $100 per month? Should we look into what might be going on with our existing feedback widget and our DocSet specific surveys to see what might be consuming more responses than others? We just wanted to take some time to really research the status quo and experiment with the trial of an upgraded Hotjar plan to see if one, the upgrade is worth it, two, if we could fix the things behind the scenes so we don't run into rate limiting again. And this means we needed to produce a proof of concept dashboard, which we would present to our management chain so we could get buy-in for this upgraded plan, which would also include nice features like SSO login and access to the Hotjar API. So I proposed this OKR for Q4 of last year to fix a couple of things. Address the rate limiting issue and determine if we were going to upgrade plans. Figure out a way to connect Hotjar as a data source into Metabase so we could query any qualitative data that comes in, directly into our documentation dashboards, and improve any existing writers' documentation dashboards to add additional data columns, such as, was this page helpful? Or no, this page was not helpful. And lastly, wanted to learn all the things and share this knowledge with the team because I left. And this is tribal knowledge. So, based off of our initial observation of the status quo, we realized a couple of things. So, the Datadog doc site receives over 1 million unique visitors per month. And since we implemented this feedback survey, or feedback widget back in 2018, we were noticing that it wasn't eliciting very many responses. And we were thinking, why was it not eliciting so many responses? For as many site visits as we get, this just didn't seem to be making a lot of sense. Very suspicious, very demure. We might want to determine what might be going on behind the scenes and investigate what we can do to maybe fix the issue that we're presented with. So we investigated and we determined that someone who will be named anonymous had set up these DocSet specific surveys in 2018 on our integration pages, which we have over 650 of, as well as the uninstall the Datadog agent doc page to get an understanding of maybe why users were uninstalling our agent. Did they not want to use Datadog anymore? Were they trying to do a hard reset? Were they trying to upgrade the version and just maybe were looking for some troubleshooting help there? We don't know. So these survey questions elicited over 27,000 responses, which was way over the response rate for the feedback widget. And this seemed to be the main culprit for why we were exceeding our 500 responses per month. Taking a step back here, we're visualizing the impact of the feedback widget versus the survey questions. The feedback widget was this small stream of responses, while the survey questions were amassing just a ton of responses. And the worst part of it all was that we weren't actioning on the data collected from these site-specific survey questions, meaning we weren't relaying any of this information back to our product or engineering teams. So once we disabled the DocSet specific surveys, this freed up space for us to access responses from the feedback widget and led us to think, should we actually replace the feedback widget with a user survey? What could this user survey provide that the feedback widget doesn't? Well, we could introduce some additional logic. We could add yes-no logic to it. So basically, we would allow our users to provide some out-of-the-box responses, fill those in, and maybe fill in the gaps with areas where they see improvement. And this will be miles better than the feedback widget, which simply presents a 1 to 5 star rating of the page, allows users to take a screenshot of a page element, and describe their experience on that page. So to kick off the redesign, we looked at a couple of examples, as you can see here. And many of these have this yes-no logic in there. And this is what we borrowed because some of this was a little not helpful. We also then rebranded our survey experience, the look and feel in Hotjar. We used the Datadog purple. We added the Datadog logo just to make the survey experience look less disjointed. And this was an official survey on our doc site, so we wanted to make sure that users would actually use it. So we also added some emojis just to make it a little fun and fruity. And instead of leaving this open-ended text form for users to describe their experience, we then added this logic of, was this page helpful? Yes. Why? And does it need improving? Or no, this was not helpful. This was why it was not helpful, and here's what you need to do to fix that. So you see the several out-of-the-box options here, these prompts, which ultimately led to these user responses being a little bit more consistent and easier to triage, as opposed to us having to manually comb through free-form text on a weekly basis. So, on to our results. From 2018 to 2023, we would on average receive 32 monthly responses per month. Since we launched this new survey in last year of October, we now have 104 responses per month. That's 3x the amount of user feedback that we received, which is pretty incredible. So we've opened the floodgates with an improved survey. So now what are we going to do with this information? We have this Hotjar plan. We have the API access. So we were thinking, why don't we try to work with our data and analytics teams to bring Hotjar in as a data source so we could query this qualitative data in our dashboards. We proposed upgrading to a plan that would allow us to use the Hotjar API to programmatically export survey responses from Hotjar into Metabase using Airbyte. We could then query this qualitative data from Hotjar, as well as the quantitative data from Google Analytics using SQL in our Metabase dashboards. This means that we could not only present a bird's eye view of how many, yes, this page was helpful, or no, this page was not helpful responses for a given doc page or a doc set, but we could also add drill down functionality so that writers could also access the individual survey responses directly in their documentation dashboards. Ultimately, documentation dashboards at Datadog are a valuable resource for brainstorming information architecture changes to existing documentation, and it works as a resource for product managers to determine what pages need to be updated or improved based on their user feedback. So we took this proof of concept dashboard that you see here, presented it to our management chain, which included both the qualitative information from Hotjar as well as the drill down functionality, and they approved it. So as soon as they approved it, we upgraded our plan and we activated the data pipeline which we built so we could start collecting Hotjar data directly in Metabase. And if you're curious, every documentation dashboard has a SQL query powering it behind the scenes. So we included the drill down functionality. And if you're curious about how this works, it connects the page results with the individual survey responses by doing a left join on two data tables using the doc page URL facet. So in this project, we've not only improved the rate of user feedback, but we've also transformed the output of this data collection process, meaning we've created a single source of truth for documentation analytics in Metabase. This means that any writer or product manager can access any and all relevant documentation data in a single source of truth. And this is self-serve analytics at play. Self-serve analytics is the ability to empower any individual at Datadog to make informed decisions on their own. So, as a wrap up, for any organizations who are looking to improve their user feedback processes, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know until you find out and start splunking. You should take the time to do your research and assess what's going on. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And lastly, or second to last, don't ghost people. Oftentimes, when people are busy, it's because their team has something going on, and it's an all-hands-on-deck type situation. So you have to remember that some of this work is not personal. It might seem personal, but it's really not. We're just really busy, and we have stuff to do. And lastly, you can't control the outcome, but you can control how you react to that. Thank you so much. And as we transition into the QA part of this, I just want to remind anyone that if you have a question, you can feel free to reach out to me on an email or my LinkedIn. Thank you.
That was a really interesting presentation, I think. It's trying to work out how to make the information that's already there more relevant for the audiences that actually want to see it and use it, and making sure it's in the right place for them so they can get the most benefit out of it. It was really interesting. Some questions from the audience. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. I loved the memes that you included. Yes. always a good idea. I had a couple of questions about collecting data. The first is, when you collect user feedback, is there seasonality to it, or are there specific times of the day where you think a survey will generate more responses? And my second question is, when you use Google Analytics, did you run into problems when you migrated from Universal to GA4, probably?
So for the first one, seasonality, yes, for sure. You know, sometimes of the year are more busy than others. So for example, Dash is our trademark annual show where we do a lot of product announcements. So we'll oftentimes find that people will visit our site more because we're doing all these like private betas and launching GA stuff. And for the second part, I don't know.
All right, who's next? Oh yeah, right over there.
Thank you. Loved it. Do you know much about intercom and how that sort of data can be pushed into a user dashboard in regard to that type of user feedback? We've just started using intercom, as in like 2 days ago. So I'm really interested to know more about how that data might be available to us.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know too much about Intercom personally, but if they have an API that you can work with, I'm sure you can connect it as a data source into your analytics system and be able to query anything and everything from it. Power of APIs.
Sorry about that feedback. It was me. Are there any other questions that we'd like to ask? Of course. Oh, yep. Oh, there's a couple of here. Let's go over there and see if we can get the mic over there. Yeah, let's do that. Good
Lucky
work.
me. I'm wondering, how well resourced was your team in the Docs team, and how much time were you able to spend figuring out what kind of changes to make and how to respond to the feedback, versus just kind of keeping up with new documentation and new product changes and just the like contribution flow of day to day?
Sorry, so can you just like...
So the question was about capacity and resourcing. And so how much space did you have to analyze all of that feedback to figure out what changes to make, versus how much were you just trying to get through the like backlog of changes you had to make anyway?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there was 2 writers on this OKR. So it was me and a senior writer doing sort of both parts. As for how we were figuring out, it's literally like we were like flying on a ship and building it at the same time. I think many of us in this room can relate to that feeling. Where like we don't really know what you're doing until you're doing it. That sort of answers the first part. I think with the second part, yeah, it's just tough. I mean, everyone's sort of just like taking more tickets based off of like actionable user feedback, but in a way, sort of the low-hanging fruit is often easier to do than the bigger chunks of work that mentally are very taxing and have a lot of cognitive overload.
And then I think there was one over there, yeah. Oh, what a leap.
Parkour.
So I was wondering how much of your feedback was about your documentation, how much was about the product itself, and then how do you make sure that product feedback gets the right people and is hopefully actioned?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say probably like 60 to 70% is like documentation specific, and 10% is product related. But from what we triage like on a weekly basis, I feel like the customers are pretty good at sort of channeling their like advice about the product to sort of their customer success managers, to their support folks, who then like rally that to like engineers or product folks. We do get like some spam, but we can just usually like filter those out.
Okay, some more questions over this side. It's a stage right heavy question and answer today. It's good.
I was just wondering how much of the feedback you received was actually actionable. In other words, it provided enough information for you to be able to identify a problem and then fix it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say that, I'd say that it used to be sort of like 20-80, like 20% actionable and 80% not. And now it's honestly more 50-50, where it's like, yes, I can do something with this because this person put no, this page was not helpful, and included like a response like, this code snippet has the wrong parameter name, or the table on this page like doesn't include the right environment variable that you're talking about in the overview. And I think by us sort of priming our users to thinking that, yes, this page was helpful, or no, this page was not helpful, it sort of enables them to also give us more constructive criticism or constructive feedback in a way that's not just like, this page sucks, you know, yeah.
Let's go with, there's one up the back, yeah. And then we'll go down the side and the front.
Hi, I just want to understand on an average how many tickets you get per week based on the analytics that you've done. And then do you guys have any internal SLAs? Hey, you know what, we got this ticket, let's finish it by X number of hours or X number of days. I just wanted to understand the process involved in triaging, because not always it's the technical writer who solves the problem. You need to have some kind of support from the engineering team as well. So how the whole process is involved in it, because I closely work on the feedback tickets, and it's the most neglected part of a product company, I would say, because the features are more, the company wants to work on features more than the feedbacks. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think most of us are experienced with having a backlog, and some tickets just end up in the backlog forever. And like, that's literally fine. Some tickets also, we put it in an icebox, and we're like, that's really cute.
Does that get a "that's really cute" label on it as well?
But to sort of answer that like more thoroughly, there was a slide talking about like the severity of user feedback, and we welcome any and every sort of piece of feedback that comes in, but the fact that our product changes so often means that oftentimes documentation that we write like changes almost monthly sometimes, depending on the product area that you're working in. So sometimes we'll validate the ticket with a product person or with an engineer, and they'll be like, oh, we're actually just like revamping this feature next quarter. So like literally, like, don't worry about it. Or it's maybe something a little bit more like important. For example, like if that piece of feedback that comes in is also something that our CEO or our CTO said, like, we're gonna address all of that. So it just depends on the severity of it, you know what I mean? Bless their heart.
Whether it's political or not can have a big weight, right? Yeah. Can we go there, and then we'll go to Lana, and then that'll be, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, like, if someone wants to, like, I know feedback is to correct, like, improve the application and the documentation, but it's more about positive feedback also. Like, people will look for the feedback column if they want to, like, make some, tell you something wrong with them. But did you get any, like, positive feedback also? Like, did you place the feedback column someplace, like, it is accessible, so that people can give positive feedback also, like that?
Yeah, we do take positive feedback, and we do relay it to sort of the writer who's responsible for like that product area. The way I like to think about it, it's like with work, when people give you compliments, you create a page in your space and you dump all those compliments there. And whenever you're feeling like, man, I've had a really bad day, or like, man, I'm down in the dumpster, you look at that little page and you like, again, say, bless your heart, like, God bless, everything is right in this world. Like, this feedback is validating me and giving me the reassurance that I need to like continue on with my day, because yeah, like life's rough. Like it's brutal out there.
For sure. And over to Lana now, and then that will conclude the Q&A, because we've got something to do after this.
Thank you so much for your talk. I loved it. I am doing something quite similar at the moment, so this is really timely for me. Aside from the intercom issues, and I'm actually totally happy to talk to you about that offline. Aside from intercom issues, one of the things I'm running into is I've got a bunch of different properties that I'm dealing with, all that are tooled differently, including intercom. But also, I like to ask really curly questions, like I like to gather self-support scores. So I have to do that by saying how many people are actually looking at our help documentation versus how many people are raising support tickets. They come from different places, obviously. And so one of the limitations I'm finding is being able to get all those various sources into one dashboard. So my question for you is, have you considered expanding some of your stuff out to those curlier kind of questions? Do you think there's value in it? Am I wasting my time?
No, you're not wasting my time at all. In fact, I have all the time in the world here. I think like being able to connect various data sources in a single source of truth is the best thing that you can do for your organization. Because essentially what we're trying to do is drive this mission of like self-serve analytics, which means it's not necessarily always you sort of like answering people's questions and sort of being, reactive to whatever comes your way from management or above. It's really providing and enabling anyone in the company to sort of dive in there. If they have a question, they sort of can do a search or use SQL to basically just find the data sources or the data that they're looking for and not have to come to you for it, right? So I hope this answers your question, where it's like, I think like any and all analytics related to documentation is very important, and it's really about trying to empower people in a way that lets them solve their questions and answer their own questions on their own, as opposed to them like relying on you and coming to you with like, so how many people created support tickets this month? Like, you know what I mean?
Okay, well, folks, that does conclude the Q&A for this particular session. Just can we join me in just thanking Austin one more time? Amazing.